This patriotic bill that we have passed today is also another major impetus to urge Nigerians to shun any act of violence and to shun the speculations that government is not doing anything. Government is doing a lot. And we in the parliament are also doing a lot. And we also continue to do a lot for them in order to ensure that we ameliorate the situation, and then in the long term, we end the suffering of Nigerians and bring the country back to a trajectory of prosperity. I hope even this bill on its own, as passed by this National Assembly today, will help to assuage the feelings of those who may not know that government is ready to do anything to assist them. So I thank you for your sacrificial contributions and your patriotic disposition. Thank you.
Aliyu Sarkin Yakin Kefi, I represent Nasarawa West Senatorial District. Let me align myself to the presenter and those that have spoken before me. Government is a business, and business comes under both credit and debit. What becomes a problem on the side of debit is the inability to redeem the indebtedness. Now, from the records, it is not in doubt that the government will be able to redeem its indebtedness. I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have spoken about the current, recurrent, and of course, the level of revenue generation in the economy. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, having said what I have said, I have a different thinking going forward, not on this particular, to reduce the financial engagements or commitments of government in developing our infrastructure. We must not necessarily be subjecting the economy or the system to only ways and means. The capital market is there as a vehicle for government to issue bonds for infrastructural development, which will enable the citizenry save by investing. It is also a borrowing, but a much cheaper borrowing that has a positive angle. By doing that, when you patronize your capital market, you are deepening and growing the capacity of your capital market. And the capital market all over the world is known as a veritable instrument for economic growth and development. So having supported and commended all that I have said, I am introducing a window going forward for tomorrow. We are supposed to be futuristic. As it's not a motion. Listen, stop distracting me. If you can't talk, I will always talk. Mr. President, you are uncommon, and we have all agreed to be uncommon senators. And what will make us really uncommon is to always look for different ways. We can't continue to be trailing on one path. When we exhaust it, we may not have where to go. But meanwhile, there are also, existing windows. The Nigerian capital market is robust enough, and especially with the recapitalization exercise coming up, with or for the banks, that will further deepen and grow the Nigerian capital market. So why not going forward tomorrow, instead of limiting ourselves to ways and means, we can as well leverage on the capital market. I so present, Mr. President, and distinguished.
Susan is Ibrahim Dankombo, representing Gombe North. Let me also rise to support the amendment, but in supporting, I will want to make this comment. Number one, that just now we have discussed that the minimum wage is going to be increased, and that is recurrent. Government services are going to be improved. These are recurrent. How capital can be more than recurrent, I don't know. But when we see the numbers, we will talk about those numbers. Two, government revenues are accruable in advance. Therefore, it is very important to have some level of borrowing from the central bank. But what matters is that when we borrow, we repay. When we borrow, we repay. And we should put a timing for the repayment. And I support that it will be too uncommon to increase the level of borrowing from 5% to 15%. That will be too wide for government to be very realistic. I support that we increase from 5 to 10% from some of the numbers that I have worked on, which I have. I therefore support that we increase the level of ways and means from 5 to 10%. And I support that this amendment should be done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Commending this proposed amendment, I think it deserves the support of the Senate, and I should be pegged to 10%. It's not about being generous to the federal government. It's about recognizing the fact that all over the world there are international best practices. If you were to increase the level to 15%, Nigeria would be on its way to that joke between Uganda President Idi Amin and the CBA governor, when he says, Idi Amin said, go and print more money, and he said, Uganda money will be turned to toilet paper. So we must understand that in macroeconomic issues, there are specific macroeconomic indicators that must be taken into account in imposing a limit. And therefore, the 10% for me is realistic, is doable, is a 100% improvement over the existing law. And the good thing that I think the president has done, and which under your leadership we are trying to work up proactively, is that unlike the past, when ways and means were done without the backing of the law, outside the framework of the law, we are ensuring that we update the law in a manner that government can act lawfully. Now, the idea of restricting the direction to which government can borrow is to avoid wastages. But it is safer to borrow on behalf of our children if it will be used to build a rail line, if it will be used to build basic infrastructure, so that education, highways, etc., etc. But if you borrow to pay salary, it's like a father borrowing to feed. And after 2 days toilet, it's over. But if a father borrows to build a house and he dies, the children can inherit the debt as well as the house that have been inherited. So, Mr. President, you know I don't like to make long speeches, and I thank you for your patience. I support this bill as argued eloquently by Abiru, who himself is not just a seasoned backer. He is well knowledgeable in basic macroeconomic issues. I think I have no hesitation in supporting the 10% and nothing more, and also restricting it to capital projects only.
Abangida Hussein, representing Jigawa Northwest. Distinguished colleagues, I think first of all I like to speak to the effort of this administration in terms of ramping up revenue generation. It's quite commendable. And at the same time, the capital component exceeding the recurrent component of the budget is also worth commending. But however, I want to propose that I like to align myself with Senator Abiru about limiting the scope of the borrowing to 10%, not 15%. Secondly, also, bullet point number 4, I would have suggested that we recouch it to read, borrowed funds shall be committed to critical sectors, because the language is flexible, it can be manipulated. I so submit, Mr. President. Thank you, sir.
Is better, because there could be security issues. You know, we could, God forbid, there could be attacks, there could be a threat to our sovereignty, and there could be the need to mobilize funds to deal with that immediately, which would be could maybe recurrent in nature. So we should not kind of tighten the space for the government. We're a nation, a very big nation, the most, the biggest, black country in the world, the largest in Africa. So we should allow the government to have that latitude. So let's not tighten the whole thing. But the only thing is to strengthen our oversight. Strengthen our oversight as explained by the President and also the Chairman Banking Committee. So let's allow it to remain, and then we'll move on so that we go in the same wavelength with the House of Representatives. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very well. This thing is not borrowing. It is an advance that the central bank grants to the federal government when it is short of revenue while implementing its program, which is supposed to be retired within the financial year. So there is no new borrowing that you are talking about. It's an advance that is given, short-term advance that is given to the government for implementation of existing projects. So you cannot tie, the only thing that we said about capital projects is that, this facility should just be granted to cover, so that capital projects will not stop, because of shortness of revenue. That's all. But the major issue is that it is not any new borrowing. It's an advance that is given to the government to implement an existing budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the Central Bank of Nigeria's CPN Act Amendment Bill 2024 and approved as follows. Long title as recommended. Number of clauses, clause 1 as recommended. Clause 2 as amended. Interpretation clause nil. Short title clause 3 as recommended. Explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Leader of the Senate. For third reading. Those in support that the bill be now read a third time say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria's Act, Cap C4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to increase the total advances of the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government from 5% to a maximum of 10%, and for other matters connected thereto 2024. Third reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria's Act, Cap C4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 2004, to increase the total advances of the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government of Nigeria from 5% to a maximum of 10%, and for other matters connected thereto, 2024, third reading taken and passed. Leader of the Senate. Let me thank all my colleagues for their contributions and again, patriotic zeal. Yes, it's been very painstaking and time-consuming, but I think doing a good thing is worth our while, because we can't rush into a bill of this nature without considering the pros and cons and looking at the implications, including inflation, and of course also the workability of government. Again, this is taken for the purpose of ensuring that government moves smoothly and that we do everything to support the administration to contribute and move the nation forward in all spheres. In order to enable us consider the votes and proceedings of today, it will be good for us to adjourn for about 30 minutes and come back by 4:30. So from there, we approve the votes and proceedings, and thereafter we can proceed on our long vacation. So I thank you. So accordingly, this Senate is adjourned to 4:30 p.m. of today.